Hey, I'm getting ready to read chapter 9, part 2 of Trouble According to Humphrey. And last we were leaving off, Humphrey was concerned about what was going to happen in the car that he was about to get in with the Paynes. It was a long, long, long ride to the Paynes' house. Or maybe it just seemed that way because of the Payne family. And in addition to Mandy and Brian, there were the twins, Pammy and Tammy. I guess they were around 5 years old. They may have been twins, but they didn't look alike. Pammy had light brown hair and red skin. Everything about her was round. Round face, round eyes, round cheeks, and round body. Tammy was as thin as a candy cane. Her hair, skin, and eyes were very pale. There was one thing they had in common. They both liked to complain as much as Mandy did. I get to sit next to Humphrey, said Pammy. No, I get to sit next to Humphrey, argued Tammy. You're too rough, said Pammy. You're too loud, said Tammy. Pipe down, Mandy shouted. You hurt my ears, Brian complained. You kids are all driving me crazy, yelled Mr. Payne, glancing at the back seat. You're driving too fast, said Mandy. He's driving too slow, Tammy whined. You hurt my ears, said Brian again, covering his ears with his hands. I wanted to squeak, please, 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 please be quiet, but no one would have heard me anyway. Now we got to the Payne's house, I figured they wouldn't argue as much outside of the car. I was wrong. When Mr. Payne plunked my cage down on a table in the living room, it felt like an earthquake. He helped Brian take off his coat and gloves, muttering, hold still. Pammy, Tammy, and Mandy threw the coats on a chair and rushed over to my cage. I want to hold him, Pammy announced. Me first, said Tammy. Later, said Mandy. She peered in at me. Sorry about the commotion, Humphrey. I'll let you rest a while, okay? Thank you, Mandy, I squeaked loudly. Hear that? He said, you're welcome, Mandy told her sisters. I heard him say, you're ugly, said Pammy, giggling. I heard him say, I like Tammy better than Pammy, said Tammy, poking her twin in the rib. Mr. Payne slumped down in a beat-up old chair and rubbed his eyes. Let's get the show on the road, he said. Mandy, why don't you fix us some mac and cheese for dinner? Again, asked Mandy. You're the oldest. I hate mac and cheese, said Pammy. I love mac and cheese, said Tammy. Mandy stopped at the kitchen. Brian followed her, shouting, Brian, help, Brian, help. About that time, Mr. Payne turned on the television. The twins immediately raced over to watch it. I want Channel 5, said Pammy. Channel 11, said Tammy. Kids, quit your belly aching. We're watching Channel 7, and that's that, said Mr. Payne in a very firm voice. For a while, the twins were silent. The TV was loud as people screeched, or maybe they were singing. The Paynes remained quiet until Mandy said, Get out of the way, Brian. This is hot. Soon I heard Brian go, Ow, and Mandy say, I told you it was hot. Now sit down. Brian rushed back into the living room, rubbing his hand. Then he noticed me and started poking his fingers in my cage. Meanwhile, I could hear dishes banging around in the kitchen. I sure wished I could see what she was doing. I'd been to a lot of houses, and I'd never seen anyone as young as Mandy fix dinner. But that's what makes being a classroom hamster interesting. I'm always learning the new things about humans. Later, Mandy brought in plates with macaroni and cheese, and the family kept watching TV while they ate. When they were all finished, they argued over who would do the dishes. It's your turn, said Mr. Payne. It's always my turn. I've never seen Mandy so annoyed. Finally, she carried the dishes into the kitchen, muttering under her breath. I have to do everything around here. I'll soak 'em, but I won't wash 'em. The Paynes watched TV, arguing from time to time over which channel to watch. Brian fell asleep first, Pammy fell asleep next, and soon after that, Tammy dozed off. Mr. Payne carried them off to bed one by one. Fun evening, huh? Humphrey said, Mandy. She checked to make sure I had clean water and food, and that my bedding was all nice and fluffy. She was really nice, although she complained I'd have understood. I'd like to see you keep. I'd like to keep you in our room, but it's too crowded. She said. If you need anything, just squeak. I'm never shy about squeaking up for myself. Mr. Payne came back into the living room alone to watch TV. He dozed off eventually, but I was wide awake. Around midnight, I heard a scritching at the front door. Mr. Payne didn't wake up, and the scritching got louder. Someone was fiddling with a lock. Someone was trying to break in the house. Wake up, Mr. Payne, wake up. I squeaked as loudly as a hamster could. Before he opened his eyes, the front door opened. A bright light was flicked on, and I heard a heavy clomp, clomp, clomping across the floor. My eyes were adjusting to the light when a loud voice said, "What is this doing here?" I saw a very tall woman looking down at me. At least she seemed very tall to me at the moment. Most humans are tall, at least compared to me. "How dare you bring this rat here without asking me?" It wasn't the first time I've been insulted, but I never liked being called a rat or being referenced to as an it or a that. The woman didn't stop there. "If you think you're bringing another mouth to feed in this house, another mouth for me to support, Pat, it's not like that." At last, Mr. Payne was up on his feet, rubbing his eyes. "It's Mandy's class pet, and it's her turn to bring him home for the weekend. If the teacher wants a pet, why doesn't she take it home?" said Mrs. Payne. I could see her better now. She was wearing a light blue cotton top and matching pants with white shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked tired and unhappy. They sent food for it. Mandy was so happy. They sent food for it. Mandy was so happy. She'll do all the work. Mrs. Payne looked a little less angry and a lot more tired. She sighed loudly. "She'd better. Speaking of food, I'm starving." She disappeared to the kitchen, but I could soon hear her complain again. "Thank you for washing the dishes." I was pretty sure she was being sarcastic because nobody actually had to wash the dishes. "You expect me to work these awful hours at an awful place with those awful old people and come home and do the dishes." She was back in the living room now, yelling at Mr. Payne. "While you sit around all day waiting for a job to fall into your lap," she continued. "It wasn't my fault the plant closed down. You know I've been trying to find a job for a year now. I've applied everywhere. When was the last time you had an interview?" Mr. Payne had that look that some of the kids get when their team loses a baseball game. "Jobs just don't grow on trees. I'll do the dishes after I fix you a sandwich." Miss Payne sat down in the shabby old chair. "I know it's not your fault that I hate this job. The pay isn't even enough to support us at night. The old people get so restless and crabby. It's awful. It wasn't as bad on the day shift, but I get paid more working at night, even if I hardly ever get to see my own kids." Mr. Payne sighed, "And I see too much of them, believe me. I don't want to hear any complaints about the kids. They need their mother, that's all." "You think I'm not going to do a good job taking care of them?" said Mr. Payne. His voice had an angry edge. "You're doing an okay job, not a great job." Mr. Payne stumped toward the kitchen. "I'll get that sandwich. Of course, it'll just be an okay sandwich since I can't do anything right." I thought Mandy's mom was about to cry. Suddenly she noticed me again. "What are you, a gerbil?" "Golden hamster," I squeaked. Not that she was understood or even cared. Mr. Payne brought his wife a sandwich and sat back down on the sofa. "More bad news," Mrs. Payne announced. "Trudy's moving to day shift, which means she can't give me a ride anymore. That means you'll have to pack up the kids in their pajamas and put them in the car." I know. We'll have to pick you up at late at night," said Mr. Payne. "It's not my fault." Mrs. Payne took a big bite out of her sandwich. "You're saying it's my fault?" "Look, we've been over this a million times," he said. "I need a job, and you need a break, and the kids need clothes, and we need another car. Never mind, Jerry. Let's drop the whole thing." Mrs. Payne nibbled at her sandwich and turned the sound up on the TV. Mr. Payne went in the kitchen and ran a lot of water, so I guess he was doing the dishes. When he came back, Mrs. Payne turned off the TV without saying a word and went to bed. Mr. Payne followed her. Finally, I was able to piece together the trouble at Mandy's house. Her father had lost his job. Her mother had a night job, apparently taking care of sick old people, and she didn't like it. The Paynes needed more money. All weekend I listened to the Paynes complain to one another, but on Sunday afternoon, Mandy performed a superb cage clean for me. First, she put all the throwaway plastic gloves Mrs. Brisbane made all the kids use. She took a plastic spoon and cleaned up my poop corner, fluffed up my bedding, and changed my water dish. And while she did, she talked to me. Now I was only too happy to listen. "I bet the other houses go to are happy and fun, and everybody laughs all the time, right?" "We used to be like that. Well, kind of like that till Dad lost his job. You understand?" I squeaked as sympathetically as I could. "I'm glad you can't talk. I wouldn't want you to tell my friends about my awful family." "They're not awful," I had to squeak up. In truth, they were pretty awful, but more than that, they were unhappy. Just then, her mother came into the room. It was Sunday, but she was dressed to go to work. "What on earth are you doing?" she asked. "Cleaning Humphrey's cage," Mandy explained. That's disgusting. I can't believe your teacher makes you do all that kind of stuff. It's worse than my job, and you don't even get paid for it. Really, it's okay, said Mandy. I have gloves, see? I put everything in a plastic bag. I don't mind. Well, I do, Mrs. Payne looked around the room. Where's your father? How should I know? I wasn't sorry when Mrs. Payne tromped out of the room. I was sorry she was so unhappy. Lucky you, Humphrey. You don't have to live here all the time, said Mandy as she closed my cage and ripped off her gloves. She even jiggled the lock to make sure I couldn't get out. Gotta go wash my hands. Back in a flash. While Mandy was gone, I thought about all the students and their families I'd helped on my weekend visiting. I managed to get Miranda and her stepsister to go from being enemies to being friends. I helped Principal Morales, the most important person at Longfellow School, get his children under control. I'd even helped our teacher's husband, Mr. Brisbane. Still, what could one small hamster do with such a big problem? This family was in trouble, and I didn't see any idea of how to help. I knew one thing: compared to the Pains, I had absolutely nothing to complain about. Humphrey spends weekend with the Pains. I've dreamed of this for a long time, says Mandy. The Humphreyville Herald, and that is the end of chapter 9.